Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I am going to be talking you through all of the books that I read in February. So, February was a bit of a mixed month. We're going to have a little bit of saltiness coming up soon. But I read 13 books in DNF 2, which means we have 15 books to talk about. And I'm just going to crack on. So, let's start with the DNFs. And I feel a little bit bad about this first one because it was a buddy read. I was buddy reading this book with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Dia from Novel Idea, and Priscilla from The Evening Reader. And it was If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller by Italo Calvino, which was also one of my 24 classics in translation to read in 24. The first, in fact, and it was a DNF. So, this book, it started out with promise. Okay, so let me set you the scene. We are following our narrator, and he goes into a bookshop and he buys a book. And now that alone hooked me in. I was like, yes. He was talking about books, about all the books that you want to read and how you go into a bookshop and you're like, oh, those are the books that one day I'm going to read, and those are the books that I've heard people talk about, so maybe I'm going to read them one day. And I was like, yes, I feel you. I hard relate to you, Mr. Narrator. And that was all fine. And then what happens, and this is not a spoiler, this is chapter 1. He gets home, he reads a bit of his book. It is not the right book, so he has to go back. And we kind of then go through multiple chapters where basically he does not get to read the book he wants to read. There is always a problem, and then so we have a section from the narrator and then a section from the book that he reads. And so we just get the beginning of lots of stories with no real end in sight. And then the narrator sections also became a little bit unbelievable. And at that point I was out. So I think I read about 30% of this one. And it was a no. It's just a no. I hate short stories, and even more than short stories, I hate reading the beginning of several. So, yeah, would not recommend. Hard unrecommend. Is that even a word? We're going to say it's a word. In 14th place, we have a book that I was group reading. The lovely Jess at Stalking Kafka set up a group read for Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And this is the story of a black man in the States in, the 60s. And I read the first chapter of this, quite long chapters, but I read the first chapter, and though the writing was good and the premise is really interesting about a man and how he sort of sees himself almost as invisible, and it's about how he got to that point, I just wasn't in the mood for like modern classic literary fiction. You know, when you're just not in the mood, and or you don't have the brain capacity to deal with it. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna push myself through this. I'm gonna stop, and then I will come back to it when I'm feeling in a more intelligent frame of mind, which is definitely not going to be for a while, just to manage expectations. Then we move on to the books I actually finished. And right at the bottom we have another book, my second book from my list of translated books, classic books in translation. And that's Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. So, I really didn't like this book. I liked some aspect. So at the beginning of every chapter there is a recipe, and then we see how that recipe sort of relates to that point in our main character's life, and I really liked that element of it. And we are following a girl who is in love with a boy, but she's not allowed to marry him because she is the youngest child, and it is the job of the youngest child to look after the mother, so they're not allowed to leave home and get married. So in his infinite wisdom, the love interest decides to marry her sister so that he can be close to her. So, firstly, this guy was an idiot, a moron, a complete idiot. I just passionately disliked this guy from the start of the book to the end of the book. And I think we were supposed to like him. So, no, he was awful. Chauvinistic, misogynist, arsehole. Okay? That's what I thought of the main love interest. As if that wasn't enough to annoy me, we have the worst trope in the world, insta-love. This girl saw him at a party one time. Loved him. That was it. This was like a huge love story from that moment on. From the moment she saw him from across the room at a party. What a load of bollocks, quite frankly. You wouldn't just like upend your life for eternity for some guy that you thought looked a bit cute across the room. Sorry, no. Absolutely not. This was also magical realism. The magical realism elements in it were ridiculous. I read fantasy. I love fantasy. I read sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I can suspend my disbelief for many, many things. Aliens, rockets hitting the earth, magic, elves. But the things in this book, just... no. Your passion setting a toilet on fire. Really? So that I didn't like either. And then, just to top it off, there was some significant sexual abuse sections in this book, which were covered in about 3 lines. So we could have a character be raped and recover from that trauma in three lines. Needless to say, I did not like it. I gave it 2 stars for the recipes. Let's move on. In 12th place, we have another 2-star book, and that is Olympus by Rachel Smythe, Volume 1. This is a graphic novel, and my librarian has been on at me to read this book for like weeks, months, a long time. And I keep saying, yeah, I take it out, I renew it every 3 weeks. Like, yes, I will get to it. I actually got to it this time, and now I'm scared to go back to the library because I really didn't like it, and it's like her favourite graphic novel. This is a reimagining of sort of Greek mythology. We have a girl who ends up going to the underworld with Hades after a party and the repercussions of that. It was fine. It was YA. Did I care? No, I didn't. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I just thought it was basic. In at 11th position. And we move to 3-star territory. And we have Womb City by Tlotlo Tsamaase. And I was super excited for this. I got this one, the audiobook from Netflix. Not from Netflix, from NetGalley. And I was really excited. The premise was a woman sort of asks the medical institute to grow her baby for her. And that was all I really knew going into it. And this had a lot of potential. But I feel, and this is Tsamaase's debut novel, and I feel like she just pumped too much into it. There were too many things going on. I think if she had stuck with 1 or 2 concepts, then I would have been all over it. But it was just too much. We have this woman who... she has tried to have a baby, but she can't, so they've paid basically for this baby to be grown in an incubator, her and her husband, but she is sort of considering an affair with another man. But on top of this, there are 2 types of citizen in this world. And this is sort of a futuristic Botswana. And some people have chips in them. and from those chips their husband and the government can basically plug in and look back at all of their memories and see what they've been doing through the day. So once a week our main character gets plugged in by her husband, and he just checks through everything that she's done that week to make sure that she hasn't been misbehaving. And then on a 3-6 monthly basis she goes into the government and they do the same. So there's some interesting conversation to be had there on class, on personal security, on like the whole Big Brother thing, and I thought that was a super interesting concept. However, from that point we kind of went down almost like a murder mystery angle, and there was also like almost an Inception type plot, if you've ever seen that movie. And yeah, there was just a lot going on. It bamboozled my mind. I wasn't quite sure where I was at any given time. I wasn't expecting the elements of horror, though I did think they were well done. I just felt like it was just another thing on top of all of the other things that were happening. So yeah, in conclusion, I would absolutely read another book by this author. I think her concept stuff is really intriguing, but she just needs to pare it back and focus in. So that's my thoughts on that one. Then we go to 3.5 star. We have Divine Might by Natalie Haynes. I read this because I thought it was going to be longlisted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, and in fact it was not. However, I did really enjoy this. I would say I enjoyed Pandora's Jar more than I enjoyed this one. I felt like it was kind of a lot of the same stuff, though I suppose it was different characters, but there were certain people. So each chapter is a goddess. Sorry, tell you what the book's about. Each chapter is looking at a goddess and how they've been portrayed in history and in modern culture, and then Natalie Haynes sort of spin on that, I suppose. And I thought the chapters on Hera and Artemis were like 5 star. Really, really enjoyed those. There was some in the middle that I felt like went off on weird tangents that maybe were there just to hit a word count. But overall, I really enjoy Natalie Haynes' sense of humour, and I think she always brings a good level of education to me on Greek myth. She is obviously very knowledgeable about it. She has a lot of opinions on how things have been presented, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. But yeah, didn't enjoy it as much as Pandora's Jar, but still a solid read. And if you're interested in Greek myth, then I think it's worth a go. Then, still on 3.5 stars, we have M by Kim Thuy. Thuy is a Vietnamese-Canadian author, and this book was written in French and translated, but I have forgotten to write all of the translators down, so they will be written below. This was a super short novel. It was shortlisted for last year's Dublin Literary Award, and it was part of the Audible Plus subscription. So if you're interested in this one, it's free on Audible. And this was really interesting, and I think actually a lot of people would love this book. It's looking at the experiences of the Vietnamese people through the Vietnamese War. And what the author does in this is it's told in vignettes, and each vignette is sort of related to the previous vignette, but it might be a different character or someone that they've met, or it might be about a topic that was being discussed in the previous vignette. So they're all sort of linked all the way through, but there isn't character in the same way that a novel has, right? It's almost like short story interconnected vignettes. And I thought some of the points that were brought up were really interesting. There were some things that I didn't know around like rubber plantations and stuff. But short stories just aren't my jam. And when I don't have a character to like hook on to, I find that quite difficult in a book that is fiction. So I would say if you're interested in the Vietnamese War and you want to know more and you want to know it from the perspective of the Vietnamese people, then this is a good book. And if you like short stories, I think this will be right up your alley. But if you're not a short story lover, then maybe head more towards something like The Mountains Sing, because is not told in a sort of chronological narrative way. Yes. Okay, we're moving up to 4-star now, and we have a book that I read to my younger son Charlie, The Worst Witch Strikes Again. I'm not going to labour this book. This is by Jill Murphy. There's a series of Worst Witch books. I think there's, I don't know, I told you last month how many there were, and now I've forgotten, like 7. And we follow Mildred Hubble, who is a witch, and not a particularly good one, and we follow her at school, and in this one she meets a new friend who perhaps gets her in more trouble than she would usually, and she usually gets into enough trouble as it is. So we really enjoyed this one again. These are such fun, quick, easy reads for children, I would say under 6, and yeah, would recommend. Another children's book here and a graphic novel. We have Garlic and the Witch. So this is the second in the Garlic duology, and this is just a lovely book. Beautiful illustrations about a little garlic who is just trying to like work out who they are and what they are and how they fit into the world. And in this one, Garlic has to go off to like a market to get some things for the witch, their mother creator, and it's about that journey and the self-discovery that happens on it. It's super cute, super wholesome. I really enjoyed both of the books in this duology. Next up, we have Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, and we are still on 4-star. I was quite concerned when I started reading this. It took me probably a good 25% to start getting into this book, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to be cancelled from BookTube. I'm going to be the only person who doesn't love Sarah Waters. But luckily it did pick up. So in this, we're following a young oyster girl, Nancy, and she goes to a show and sees Kitty. Kitty is a stage performer, and she sort of instantly falls in love with everything about Kitty, the performance and Kitty herself. And they move to London and become a sort of double act, or Nan becomes her dresser, and yeah, they move in together and they begin a relationship, but things go a little awry. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really interesting look at London in the, I don't even know when this is set, like early 1900s maybe, and I really enjoyed that look. I liked the character of Nan and the character arc, and the fact that Nan really had quite a lot of shades of grey in her character, as all of the characters did in this book. So yeah, once you get into it, I feel like this is a really fun ride. It goes through lots of stages of plot, which sort of kept me engaged, and I really liked the way things developed for Nan throughout the book and how we could see her personal growth as each sort of element hit her. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Intrigued to read more Sarah Waters, and I would go in now knowing that I need to give it a good 100 odd pages before I make a decision on whether I like it or not, because yeah, it just took a little while to warm up. This was the FOMO pick for January and February. FOMO is the book club, the Fear of Missing Out book club that I run with Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf and Jack from Spare Bookjoy. We have had some trouble organising the live show for this just because of diary availability for everybody. However, we are hoping to run the live for this probably towards the end of March. So if you're interested in joining and you haven't read it yet, you still have some time. If you have read it and you're wondering where the chat is, it is coming. Apologies, we have just really struggled to align diaries in February. So yes, we will let you know. That will be advertised, announced on community tabs and the like once we've finalised the date. So yep. Then we have another buddy read. I read The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, and I read this with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, Jack from Spare Bookjoy, and we had a pretty fun time with this. This is a really interesting book. It's at its heart a locked room mystery. We know someone died, and our main character moves through the plot trying to figure out who killed her. There are time travel elements to this, so you could call it sci-fi, but it was just a wild ride, and I am not really a mystery or thriller reader, and so I really enjoyed this for what it was. It was really fun trying to figure out what was going on, what all the clues were pointing to, especially fun reading it with a group of people. But I think I was the one that enjoyed it most, and I think that's probably because it's not something I usually read, so I don't really have a bar to measure it against. I would say that I think Turton flopped the landing. The ending didn't really work for me. I felt like it was quite weak compared to the rest of the book, but I really had a fun time. So I would recommend, especially if you're just looking for a bit of escapism and for your brain to hurt in a good way. Then we have The Last Bear by Hannah Gold. I also read this to my younger son Charlie, and I've been meaning to get to this for a long time. This is a pretty beloved book, and we follow a young girl who moves to an Arctic island with her dad. Her dad's a scientist. Her mother has died, and so it's just the two of them. And we sort of see how lonely she is and he is. And she comes across a polar bear on this island where there should not be polar bears. And we sort of see their relationship develop. It's super cute, middle grade, in case you didn't guess by just this. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good way to introduce climate change to children and add like a personal touch. I know there is now a sequel to this, which my lovely friend Jack at Spread Book Joy has done a review for, so I will leave that below if you're interested. I will certainly be looking to get to the next one at some point. But yeah, really great book to read with kids. Probably Charlie was too young for it. I would say maybe 7 to 11 this book would work well for. And yeah, really liked it and really glad I finally got to it. Oh, and there's some beautiful illustrations in here as well. Dotted all the way through. So, yeah, great book. Then we have another graphic novel. I was obviously on a graphic novel kick in February. And we have the second in the Lightfall series by Tim Probert. The final book in this trilogy is due to come out, I believe, in April. So I am really looking forward to that. But this continues the story of a young girl who meets a Galdurian, who is sort of an ancient, thought to be extinct species from this world, and they are tasked with trying to save the light in this kingdom. So many moons ago the sun disappeared, and now they have lights to light up their kingdom, and that is under threat by an enemy. So the second book sort of continues on their journey together. That isn't a spoiler for the first one, by the way. That is like early doors stuff. And yeah, I just really enjoyed seeing the relationship between the two main characters develop. I liked the way that Probert starts to bring in some low-level politics into this. This is a children's graphic novel, so you can sort of see him setting the base for children to move on to more politically complex plots, which I think is fantastic. And yeah, I would recommend. In second place, we have The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan, and I'm not going to go into detail on this one. I do have a solo review, so that will be linked below. But this was a fabulous book looking at World War II Malaya, both before Japanese occupation and after Japanese occupation, before being British occupied. And we follow a mother and her children over 4 different perspectives through these 2 timelines as the mother becomes a spy for the Japanese and the ramifications of that. So yeah, a great book, fabulous debut. Can't wait to see what Chan does next. And then my only 5-star of the month was The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, and I read this with the fabulous Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. And we had a blast. It was a long time ago that I read the 5th season, so I did have to read like a summary before I went in, and I'm glad I did because I had forgotten a lot. And this book was just propulsive all the way through. Alice and I just couldn't put it down, basically. It's very difficult to describe what happens in the second book, if you haven't read the first book, but we follow some of the same characters from the first book. We're in a post-apocalyptic world, a world that has seasons where basically big climate things happen that mean that it's impossible to live in the environment, the surface level environment. Yeah, it's very difficult. I'm going to leave my 5th season review below for you, because that was fresh in my mind at the time that I read it, and will give you a taste for the series as a whole. But yeah, the second book was excellent, and we do go back to some of the history of one of the characters and explore that a little bit more deeply, which is fabulous, and a new character perspective is introduced. So yeah, it's really hard to talk about it because I don't want to give any spoilers. But if you like fantasy, even if you don't like fantasy, because Alice was never a fantasy person before this, this is exceptional writing, exceptional plotting, exceptional storytelling. N.K. Jemisin is a rock star. So that's it. Those were all of the 15 books that I read in, well, 13 plus 2 DNFs that I read in February. I would love to know what your favourite books of the month were, and if you missed my review of The Storm We Made, I will leave that here, and I'll see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys!